In a land where civilization first took root, an empire once rose above all others. It shaped languages, forged armies, and for a moment seemed destined to rule eternity. But in the shadows of its glory, unseen forces gathered: famine, disease, rebellion, and the restless march of migrating peoples. What followed was not merely the fall of a kingdom, but the unraveling of a world. This is the forgotten story of the Akkadian Empire, its rise, its curse, and the dark century that followed. A story carved in shattered tablets and whispered through ancient myth. Welcome to the fall of Akkad. In the heart of Mesopotamia, between the life-giving waters of the Tigris and Euphrates, some of humanity's earliest civilizations rose and flourished. These fertile lands witnessed the birth of Sumer, the rise of the Akkadian Empire, and the foundations of urban society. Yet they also became the stage for one of history's most dramatic collapses. The fall of the Akkadian Empire in the late 3rd millennium BCE was not a single event, but a long, turbulent cascade of crises. It was a collapse shaped by migration pressures, economic turmoil, devastating epidemics, political mismanagement, and a loss of social cohesion. In time, this tragedy would be remembered through myth and poetry as the Curse of Akkad. By the late 23rd century BCE, the Akkadian Empire had ruled Mesopotamia for nearly 2 centuries. At its height, the empire boasted wealth, military power, and an unprecedented territorial reach. Its prosperity, however, became a magnet for surrounding peoples. Waves of Amorites, Hurrians, Lullaby, and particularly Gutians streamed into Mesopotamia in search of fertile lands and better opportunities. What began as steady migration soon intensified into a mass movement that the empire could no longer regulate. The demographic balance shifted sharply. Native Sumerians and Akkadians gradually became minorities in their own cities, which were now populated by groups speaking different languages and practicing diverse customs. This drastic population increase placed enormous strain on resources. Agricultural production, despite the region's rich soils, could not match the soaring demand for food and textiles. Prices soared to unimaginable levels. Half a sila of grain, barely half a kilogram, could cost an entire lamb. Wool, once plentiful, became almost inaccessible. Basic goods slipped into the black market, and competition between locals and newcomers grew increasingly hostile. Economic structures that had supported Mesopotamian urban life for centuries began to crack under the pressure. Amid this instability, a silent and deadly threat swept through the empire. A disease referred to in later tablets as biba, described as beginning with severe headaches and ending in bodily decay, spread rapidly across the overcrowded cities. The epidemic did not discriminate. Both wealthy and poor fell victim. Temples overflowed with desperate citizens seeking divine help, while markets and streets echoed with coughing and cries of pain. Yet many city governors concealed the worsening situation from the imperial capital. Under Akkadian administration, reporting a crisis could be perceived as failure and lead to dismissal or execution. As a result, the empire drifted blindly into catastrophe. At the center of this faltering world stood Naram-Sin, one of the most controversial rulers of the ancient Near East. Renowned for his military conquests, he elevated himself to the status of a living god, commissioning statues that depicted him with the horned crown of divinity. His court was dominated by an elite class loyal primarily to him, often at the expense of traditional Sumerian institutions. Over time, tensions grew between the Akkadian ruling circles and the Sumerian populace, who felt increasingly marginalized. Ancient rivalries resurfaced, and every political misstep widened the divide. These tensions erupted in the sacred city of Nippur, the religious center of Sumer and home to the revered Ekur Temple of the god Enlil. As famine and disease ravaged the south, people flocked to Nippur, filling the temple courtyard with prayers and demands for relief. When divine pleas went unanswered, desperation turned to anger. The chants of worshippers evolved into cries of rebellion. Akkadian troops stationed in the city could no longer contain the swelling crowds. Nippur had become the heart of a full-scale Sumerian uprising. In 2219 BCE, Naram-Sin marched toward Nippur, determined to crush the revolt. His army entered the city with the brutality reserved for foreign enemies. Civilians were cut down, homes were burned, and the rebellious districts were leveled. At the climax of the campaign, Naram-Sin ordered the destruction of the Ekur Temple, an act of sacrilege without precedent in Mesopotamian history. The sacred statues were dragged out and burned. The temple treasury was looted. Ekur itself was reduced to rubble. For the Sumerians, this was not only the destruction of a holy place, it was the desecration of their identity. The event would echo through centuries of literature, immortalized as the moment when the anger of the gods turned against the Akkadian king. Shortly after the Nippur campaign, Naram-Sin succumbed to a sudden illness, possibly the very epidemic that plagued his people. His death plunged the empire into political chaos. Regional governors, no longer held in check by the once mighty imperial system, lost authority or sought independence. City-states across Sumer declared autonomy. As internal conflicts multiplied, the once unified Akkadian realm disintegrated into warring factions. Into this vacuum descended the Gutians. Emerging from the Zagros Mountains, they swept across northern and central Mesopotamia, conquering cities that were weakened by famine, plague, and civil strife. Akkadian resistance collapsed rapidly. For the next 90 years, the Gutians dominated the land between the rivers. Historical records from this period are sparse, unsurprising for a people who kept few written records, but Sumerian literature paints a bleak picture. Poets likened the Gutians to locusts swarming across the kingdom. Trade routes fell silent. Couriers no longer traveled the roads. Boats no longer sailed the rivers. Lawlessness spread, and ancient cities that had thrived for centuries were abandoned or destroyed. Mesopotamia plunged into a dark age marked by fear, uncertainty, and cultural decline. Yet even in this darkness, the spark of resistance remained. In Uruk, a leader named Utu-Hegal emerged as the champion of the Sumerian revival. According to inscriptions, he prayed to Enlil at the rebuilt shrine in Nippur and received divine approval to wage war against the Gutians. Gathering the remaining forces of Uruk and Ur, Utu-Hegal launched a daring counteroffensive. The Gutian king, Tirigan, attempted to flee, but was captured along with his family. In a powerful scene preserved in stone relief, Tirigan was cast at Utu-Hegal's feet, symbolizing the end of Gutian dominance and the restoration of Sumerian sovereignty. The victory paved the way for the rise of the Third Dynasty of Ur under Ur-Nammu, marking the beginning of a new golden age often described as a Sumerian Renaissance. Cities were rebuilt, monumental ziggurats rose once more, law codes were established, and literature and science experienced a resurgence. Mesopotamia recovered, but the memory of Akkad's fall endured as a profound warning. The story of the Akkadian collapse is not simply a tale of invasion or internal revolt. It is a testament to the fragility of complex societies. It reveals how environmental pressures, demographic changes, pandemics, political arrogance, and social fragmentation can combine to bring down even the most formidable empires. The legend known as the Curse of Akkad reflects the ancient attempt to understand this catastrophe, attributing it to divine wrath. Yet modern analysis shows that the true cause lay in a convergence of human decisions and natural forces. Today, the fall of Akkad stands as a powerful reminder. When leaders grow distant from their people, when crises are hidden instead of confronted, and when unity gives way to division, even the greatest civilizations can crumble. And in the ruins of such collapses, it is always the stories, poems, myths, and memories that endure, carrying the lessons of the past into the future. From the ashes of the Akkadian Empire and the long, dark shadow of Gutian rule, a new power began to rise. In the city of Ur, a dynasty emerged that would rebuild what had been lost, restore order to the land, and usher in a renaissance of art, law, and architecture. This was the Third Dynasty of Ur, heirs to the Sumerian legacy, guardians of ancient wisdom, and the civilization that would carry Mesopotamia into a new age. Empires fall, but from their ruins, new worlds are born. And in the wake of Akkad's curse, it was Ur that rose to shape the future of the Fertile Crescent.